This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
UN calls for drastic change to curb global warming, including a change in diet and land use. South Africa publishes a draft national health insurance bill that could pave way for an overhaul of the health system. And South Sudan boosts oil production by 6,000 barrels. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Uche Okoronko with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Suez Canal revenue up by $300 million. And MTN reports a 9.3% drop in earnings. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And let's begin with environmental matters. The United Nations report on global warming says efforts to curb greenhouse gas emissions and impact of global warming will not be fully achieved if drastic action is not taken. The report recommends a change in land use, agriculture and human diets. CGTN's Laura Walubengo reports.
The newly released report says the manner in which human beings have been interacting with nature is not healthy. And its true impact will be unhealthy to populations of the world as food shortages spike in the near future.
Increasing impacts on land are projected in the future as a result of water scarcity, wildfire, and permafrost thawing. In a warmer climate, the capacity of the land to store the carbon may be reduced.
Rising global populations and the pressure on land will most likely produce little food that will not be as nutritious as expected.
Despite increasing food production, an estimated 821 million people are undernourished. In cold regions, yields may temporarily benefit from warmer climate conditions. In general, climate change will cause declined yields, increased prices, reduced nutrition levels, and disruption in supply chains for food.
Earthland masses make up to 30% of the globe. Increasing exploitation of this land for food production and industrialization continues to produce more gases, which in turn leads to global warming.
Limiting global warming to 1.5 or even 2 degrees will involve removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and land has a critical role to play in carbon dioxide removal.
But the report says it's not too late yet, for this can be reversed only if humans change how they interact with the environment.
Sustainable land management can improve the amount of emissions that soils and vegetation absorb and sometimes reverse the adverse impacts of climate change.
Meanwhile, scientists are also proposing reduction of intake of red meat as one of the ways of curbing climate change. Another report published in the Lancet Medical Journal says abandoning beef for beans could reduce more gases that contributed to global warming, hence see a healthier population.
We suggest quite substantial increases in nuts, legumes, including soy products. And that's because those foods are not just getting rid of red meat. They have many, many health benefits. They have healthy forms of fat, lots of mineral, vitamins, fiber. So that's why this diet is so healthy. It's not just reducing red meat and limiting dairy, but it's replacing those with a lot of foods that many people don't consume very often, but that have very positive health benefits.
Well, it is a mixed bag of findings, as the world seeks to reverse effects of global warming that are already being experienced, especially in Africa. Effects that will only worsen with time if the warnings are not heeded. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, let's bring in Dr. Emmanuel Ziwa, who is the Deputy Team Leader, Climate Change Program at the UN Food Agency, FAO, in Uganda. He's joining me live from Kampala. Dr. Ziwa, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. That UN report, though, on global warming, it is a significant report that looks closely at the link between land use and climate change. What were the main findings, though?
Thank you. Good evening, viewers. The report, the IPCC report on climate and land has many findings, but among the findings that are concerning land shows that more than a third or more than a quarter of the land, which is ice-free in the globally, is subject to human-induced degradation. But we also note that humans depend on land for food and for many other purposes. Now we understand that food production, especially for cereals globally, from 1961 up to 2017, increased by 240%. This means that over the years, the human footprint on land is increasing as we are opening up more land to produce enough food for the increasing population.
All right, so the human footprint is increasing and humans are depending more and more in larger quantities on land use for food. So the report, though, stops short of telling people to become vegetarian. How do our eating habits contribute to global warming, and why is eating less meat good for the planet?
Livestock production involves use of more water, and this means that we basically extract a lot from our environment to produce meat. Now, the reason why there is advocacy to increase more plant-based foods and lessen the meat or livestock-based foods is because producing 1 kilogram of beef, for example, requires a lot of water compared to the amount of water which is required to produce food crops. And the major challenge we are having is that livestock production globally is changing from the traditional systems that we had to what we call the industrial livestock production. Now, industrial livestock production is based on feeding food crops to animals. There are already estimations that if, for example, we do away with industrial livestock production, the food crops which are used in feeding animals can feed an extra 2.5 billion people.
So very briefly, though, Dr. Ziwa, tell us about the recommendations that the report is making to help fight climate change, very briefly.
The report advocates for, one of them is lessening lessening consumption of meat and consuming more of food crops. This advocacy to turn the population into vegetarian from meat-based diets is one of the actions that humans can take to lessen climate change. We have a lot to do with responsible consumption. We have issues that are related to, for example, adaptation in Africa using drought-tolerant crops. It's among the major actions that African farmers can take. Also resorting to irrigation such that we can supplement our rain-fed agriculture with irrigation at both small scale and large scale, and also using energy-efficient mechanisms in producing and driving our lifestyles.
Dr. Emmanuel Ziwa joining us there from Kampala. Thank you for your update. Well, meanwhile, Ethiopia has gone into the record books by planting over 350 million trees in a day. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is leading the project, which aims to counter the effects of deforestation and climate change in the drought-prone country. The UN says Ethiopia's forest coverage declined from 35% of total land in the early 20th century to a little above 4% in the 2000s. CGTN's Girumchala has more on this.
The name of the initiative, Green Legacy. The total number of seedlings planned for planting, 4 billion. And so far, Ethiopia has managed to plant more than 3 billion of them in less than 6 months' time. Within a day, a record 200+ million seedlings were planted across Ethiopia. Of that number, Addis Ababans take 3 million.
So the initiative to plant 4 billion trees and especially 7.7 million in Addis Ababa, and all over today we're planning to plant 3 million. Of course, the turnout will be more than 3 million, and the initiative is to cope up with the current environment and so that we build a resilient economy, a resilient city, so that the resident of the city will have more fresh environment.
The nationwide tree planting initiative was launched by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed himself, creating awareness about the green development and motivate reforestation were some of his plans. Hundreds of millions of people responded across Ethiopia quickly and have joined the campaign.
As you have seen, the people came out driven by their own interests to plant seedlings. In the meantime, I would like to mention to you that we are committed to protect and water these seedlings and inspire you who will see them grow well.
I'm here with my child who is less than 2 months old. We came to leave our green legacy by planting seedlings. It simply is a God-sent initiative that we are happy to be part of.
I would really like it if this day could be celebrated as an yearly seedling planting day or simply a green day. I would like in this regard to thank our Prime Minister for this idea. He is our green leader.
With the plan of planting 4 billion trees going well, Ethiopia is well positioned to improve its current 4% forest coverage. Addis Ababa's Mayor Takala Uma is even hopeful the campaign could be exemplary for the rest of the African continent.
Hey, climate change is real, it's not a hoax, and the initiative is to make Ethiopia green again and Addis Ababa green again. And we will always remember that Addis Ababa itself is a fresh flower, a new flower, and we need to make it again, and we need to make Addis to live up to that name and remember what started in Addis is inspired all over Africa. And remember that also Addis Ababa is a seat for Africa, African Union, and African people are still residing here, and we are happy to have them too.
Ethiopia might be grappling with all sorts of challenges, from ethnic inflated chaos to political and economic instability. But with the kind of unity people are displaying across the country, experts tell you Ethiopia has a reason to hope for a brighter and stronger future soon to come. Group Dara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The China Communications Construction Company has officially commenced construction work on Ethiopia's project to beautify the capital, Addis Ababa. The project is expected to clean, conserve and give a facelift to the riverside of Addis Ababa. CCCC will begin by conducting work on 3 square kilometers of riverside land. CGTN's Girumchala again has the details.
The Beautifying Shega project is part of a wider plan to clean the heavily polluted rivers in the Ethiopian capital. Out of the 52 kilometers of that project, the China-based CCCC construction company will contribute and work on the 12 kilometers.
The CCCC and other Chinese businesses have contributed a lot to the local economic growth and prosperity of the Ethiopian society. We want to work closer with and contribute more to the development of infrastructure, such as the riverside projects, so that we can add more to the China-Ethiopia friendship.
Immediately after the launch of the beautifying Sugar project, the whole country had given it an overwhelming support. And this idea of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has managed to get a global attention too. China, though, made the largest pledge of it all. It will build 12 kilometers of the whole project free of charge.
China has given grants to many African states this year. This is apart from the usual project investment we already know. We remember the continent-wide grant given in the form of the building of the African Union headquarters. And now China has allocated a huge sum of money to support the Riverside project. This grant is a sign of an ever stronger relationship between our two countries.
Now that the much-anticipated project is coming to a reality, CCCC has started mixing sand, cement and water to build parks, walkways and landmarks. This has excited Addis Ababa residents.
This is truly exciting. When you look at the rivers of our city, even the one behind me, the pollution and smell are unbearable. The project ongoing will fix all that. We will have parks and above all, it will allow us to live a better life.
This is great for the beauty of the city, to improve our neighborhoods. It will attract more tourists, whether from within the country or outside the country. It is a wonderful time for the young generation to live in.
The China Communications Construction Company is expected to finish its share of the river land development by April 2020. Already, excitements are high to eventually see the full finalization of the beautifying Sugar project in just a few years' time. Group Chala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
South Africa has published its draft National Health Insurance Bill. The bill creating an NHI fund paves the way for a comprehensive overhaul of South Africa's health system that would be one of the biggest policy changes since the ruling African National Congress ended white minority rule in 1994. According to a senior official, universal health care for millions of poorer citizens would cost about $16.89 billion to implement by 2022. Less than 20% of South Africa's population, or 58 million, can afford private health care, while a majority of poor blacks queue at understaffed state hospitals short of equipment. Let's cross over to Angelo Coppola now in Johannesburg. Angelo, so what does the National Health Insurance mean for South Africans?
Bottom line, Beatrice, it means that there's affordable health care for all people in South Africa, and that's everybody. That's according to the Department of Health and the Health Minister when he introduced the bill in Parliament earlier today. It means that medical scheme members will apparently be also paying less for the same services they've been getting currently in terms of their private healthcare funds, if that's, I understood the Department of Health Director General correctly. Households that didn't have access to quality healthcare, of course, will now have access at affordable prices. This is great news for people who previously couldn't afford that quality healthcare that was available to the private healthcare sector. In terms of the broad spectrum of private healthcare professionals, they've also all bought into it. We understand the Department of Health are telling us that all the doctors and the healthcare professionals are on sides with this initiative. But at least one listed healthcare group, Discovery, the big gorilla in the room, didn't react too positively to the news. They were down 9% on the day, Beatrice.
Well, Angelo, it is a major policy change, though. So what services will be covered in the NHI, and who exactly will pay for the national health insurance?
Okay, look, all services that are currently available to medical scheme members, the private healthcare sector, will be available to everybody, to all South Africans. The National Health Insurance Fund will negotiate with private hospitals and the doctors' groups for rates and services. People will have access to those services at capped rates. On the public sector health services and on facilities, these will be upgraded and modified, and we're told that this process will take around 7 years to complete. So we're penciling in an implementation date for full service by 2026. That's according to the plan that's been put in place now. In terms of who's going to pay for it, Beatrice, well, we understand that the medical scheme members are currently spending around $33 billion a year on private healthcare services. That's according to the Department of Health. National Treasury says they've identified several health revenue streams. Most of them will affect taxpayers and people who are currently paying that private medical scheme fund or fee that they pay every month. There's going to be some funding sourced from general taxation, although we don't know exactly where the government is going to pull that money from. It's unclear at the moment, but we're sure to hear about it shortly. Then they're going to also extract provincial grants on medical services and divert that to the National Health Insurance. Perhaps the biggest contributor, though, Beatrice, is the $1.9 billion worth of tax credits that taxpayers and medical scheme members are currently getting from government to subscribe to those healthcare services. So that's where we're sitting in terms of where the funding is going to come from, Beatrice.
Major policy change there in South Africa's healthcare system. Angelo Coppola joining us from Johannesburg. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. A ship with rescued migrants remains at sea for the 7th day. And South African scholar creating disease models to study African gene variants.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Sudan says it has boosted oil production by 6,000 barrels, bringing its oil output to over 180,000 barrels per day. The country's petroleum ministry says increased oil production will provide badly needed funds for services in the country. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
For years, this field was closed due to insecurity, but now the Manga oil field has resumed production in these areas. That has given South Sudan a much-needed boost for its economy, which is heavily dependent on oil. More than 98% of the country's budget comes from the resource.
We know that South Sudan has a lot of opportunities that are still yet to be developed, especially in regards to energy security, and energy security is key and it is number one. For us to talk about energy security, we talk about refining. When we talk about refining, it means that we can develop other sectors using fuel directly.
The government hopes to further increase production, setting a target of 200,000 barrels a day by the end of this year.
South Sudan's government hopes by increasing oil production, it will be able to raise money that would be required for the implementation of the peace deal.
Security has improved in South Sudan since the agreement was signed. Experts say if peace holds, the economy could get back on track.
We believe with the production of oil, which is currently ongoing, the exchange rate is going to stabilize. And since oil is the only product that is contributing hugely into the GDP of this country, the resumption of oil production will actually stabilize the economy and we'll see exchange rates coming down.
The government says it is now ready for international investment.
South Sudan is becoming more secure and the peace implementation also is in progress, which will help us also to attract more investors to South Sudan, whether in the upstream or in the downstream. And as we do that, our banking system, our financial system will also improve as we attract a lot of investors on an equal basis.
The country's civil war, which began in 2013, led to a sharp decline in oil production. By 2014, South Sudan was producing fewer than 130,000 barrels per day. That led to soaring inflation and economic stagnation. So, as the country continues to recover from years of turmoil, the reopening of oil fields is bringing renewed hope. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Altor Oilfield, South Sudan.
Scores of migrants on board a Spanish rescue ship are still waiting for clearance to dock in European waters. No country has so far offered to receive the migrants. The ship is currently near Lampedusa. The 121 migrants from different nations were rescued from the Mediterranean waters over a week ago, but have been stranded for the last 7 days. Some are fleeing the ongoing conflict in Libya. Italian Parliament recently approved a decree that raises the maximum fine to $1.1 million against anyone entering Italian waters without permission. A senior officer of the Open Arms Ship Charity calling on European nations to take the necessary steps before it is too late.
Today is August 8th, 2019. This means it is the 7th day with the 121 rescued people. The more time goes by, the more complicated it is to explain to them why they cannot disembark, to explain why they cannot be taken to a safe port where their life is not in danger. As time goes by, situations of anxiety and nervousness are increasing. They don't want to reach a point where the situation is out of control. Politics cannot go before people. Therefore, we once again repeat the urgency to have a safe port where we can disembark these people following the international agreements, and especially in reference to the Human Rights Declaration, emphasizing the rights to life.
Only a handful of people in South Africa have mastered stem cell reprogramming. 34-year-old Dimakatso Gumede is one of them. Gumede works on creating disease models of the innate immune system to study unique African gene variants. Gumede says the African population is known for its genetic variation, which often affects the way in which an individual responds to a particular medication. CGTN's Jelisa Njamela has more.
This is 34-year-old Dimakatso Gumede, a University of Cape Town PhD scholar. Gumede studied the role of a gene mutation that causes skin and lung fibrosis using a scientific method called induced pluripotent stem cells.
We extract what we call the fibroblasts and then use those cells, well, really any cell in the skin that we take, the biopsy that we take, we can use small molecules that can able to change the chromatin of the cell back into a very young, naive state that can become any cell type should we use it for whatever we want to use it for.
As the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, or CSIR's candidate researcher of the Bioengineering and Integrated Genomics Research Group, she works on creating disease models of the innate immune system to study unique African gene variants that lead to elite controllers that naturally control viral load levels without antiretroviral therapy.
We know that there's a population, and a lot in the African population because of genetic diversity. There's that genetic variance, that some small differences with other, Caucasians, for example, where a drug doesn't really respond well to the people, or the people who, African populations per se, don't respond well to that particular drug, unlike the Caucasians, because most of the medicine is really designed in the Western countries, but when you bring it back into our country, some people have adverse reactions to that.
CSIR regards public dissemination of science as quite critical. As the guardians of knowledge, the Council says it works to ensure that the work that is done is shared.
Gumede has mastered the craft of communicating her work in English, isiZulu, and Sesotho, which is key in science and technology, as it ought to be accessible to all, especially young people who are keen to pursue careers in science.
Dima Katso is the first person, she's probably the only person in the world who can communicate it into indigenous African languages. Can you imagine the kind of response that must have for a young girl who previously couldn't imagine that she could become a scientist, being able to understand advanced technologies in her own language and looking up to a role model like Dima Katso to think, I can do that as well.
Gumede attributes her success to a number of women who have inspired her in her life journey.
I have to say that I've been very fortunate to be mentored and taught mostly by women. And I have to also credit my late supervisor, Professor Bongani Mayosi, who just made it all seem possible.
With the skills that she has gained, she aims to use her PhD to further establish the stem cell platform for precision medicine, drug screening, and possibly commercialization in the CSIR. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
Well, let's now go over to Uche Okronko for a look at the day's business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Suez Canal revenue up by $300 million. And MTN reports a 9.3% drop in earnings.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Egypt. Annual revenue from Egypt's Suez Canal has risen by $300 million to $5.9 billion. Now, the canal, which is the fastest shipping route between Europe and Asia, is also one of the Egyptian government's main sources of foreign currency. Now, under President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Egypt has invested in an expansion of the Suez Canal, which began in 2014. It is one of the military commander's mega projects designed to revive an ailing economy and restore the country's place as an important trade hub. Suez Canal Authority Chairman Mohab Mamish says the canal has also achieved a record number of 81 ships passing through its waters every day, with a projected forecast of around 97 ships by 2023.
Last week, we achieved a record number with the passage of 81 ships in one day. Our forecast projected that we could have 97 ships passing through the canal by 2023. It is 2019, and we have had 81 ships, and tomorrow, God willing, there could be 79 ships. So the rate of ships passing through is going up, and this is proof of the success of the new branch of the Suez Canal. For these 81 ships to have passed through a single branch in the Suez Canal would have taken 2 to 3 days. Around 20,000 ships a year go through the canal, and the canal is a lifeline. And when the new branch of the canal was built, life started to flow through the economic zone of the Suez Canal.
Meanwhile, Egypt has opened its biggest fertilizer industrial complex. The facility, which is also considered the largest in North Africa, includes 9 plants with a production capacity of about 1 million tons per year. Now, it's part of the government's strategy to manufacture raw materials for export. CGTN's Adel El Mahoui reports.
Egypt has inaugurated the biggest fertilizers industrial complex in North Africa. On the Red Sea's Ain el-Sokhna city, the 400 acres project is connected with a port, and its main purpose is to export its products after covering domestic demand.
Egypt has been in the past exporting a lot of the raw materials, so now we're moving into the production process, which is great because it provides a lot of value added. It creates jobs, it contributes significantly to our GDP and productivity overall. Plus, it will allow us, instead of Egypt being a net importer of such chemical products, we're actually going to be exporting these products, and that's very important for overall the economy because it will also generate foreign revenues in foreign currency.
More than $1 billion have been invested in this complex, which is designed to be self-sustainable. It includes 9 factories, electric power generators, and housing for its 1,500 employees. This facility has increased fertilizers production in the country by almost 60% to reach 2.7 million tons annually.
Fertilizers are very profitable. We have a long experience in exportation. Our company has exported to 46 countries in the world, most of them European. This complex tool production capacity is about 1 million tons from phosphatic and compound fertilizers. If we add this capacity to our other factories, the Nasser company will now be producing 1.5 tons annually.
These factories are owned and run by the Defense Ministry's chemical arm Al Nasr Company. To maintain the international standards required for exportation, it is equipped with a high-tech chemical laboratory. Egypt proudly says it managed to cut the construction time by more than half to take only 3 years.
The biggest challenge we faced is the time factor. Why is that important? Because the sooner I create jobs for Egyptians, the faster change in their lives will come. When we negotiated with companies, they told us between 6 years and 7 years. I told them we would help, that we would waive all the bureaucratic obstacles they may face in order to bring this project to light.
This new chemical industrial complex has become the first in Egypt to produce crystallized soluble diammonium sulfide and monoammonium sulfide. With these products, Al Nasr Company for Intermediate Chemicals has become the 6th in the world to produce these products. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Ain al-Sukhna, Egypt.
Now, Africa's largest mobile network by subscribers, MTN, has reported a 9.3% drop in earnings, according to interim financial results to end in June. Now, the company described the year as one with difficult trading conditions across most of its major markets. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola reporting.
Despite the tough conditions, its service revenue grew by 9.7%. And earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation and amortization expanded by 10.2%.
So I do think it's a slightly different set of circumstances. Growing 9.7 constant currency when, your largest opco is sitting at 3.3, that's quite some running. Good margin expansion in Nigeria. I think the numbers are pretty solid. And what I'm personally excited about is we're really showing that we're executing on the strategy. We were talking about advanced instant messaging a year ago, and now we have 300,000 customers.
The group also announced at its last results presentation that it would be looking at non-core assets and disposing of those that didn't fit their strategy. Travelstar was one such asset. It was sold and generated a return of some $86 million.
We also listed Jumia, but as we noted, when we announced on Jumia is that we do have a lock-up period, and until that period, there's nothing we can do, but we always exercise our minds.
The group also launched a low-end $40 smartphone last year, and they are now testing a $20 Android unit.
This is really aimed at more the aspiring youth customers. So youth customers, they know apps, Android, Google, Insta, etc. But with low levels of per capita income across most of the markets, entry-level, Android smartphones have historically been beyond their reach. The cheapest phones in most of our markets are around $40. So this is a $20 Mobicel device, which is unheard of.
It's not all good news, though. In the South African market, one of its clients, rivals Cell C, have run into liquidity issues. It's meant that MTN had to provision for a possible loss of nearly $30 million. Some payments, however, have been made since the end of the period.
They've notified us is that they have secured funding that allows them, to improve their liquidity situation. That's what was announced yesterday. Obviously the South African team is working towards, they've put together a non-binding term sheet, and in the next couple of months we'll work towards trying to get a long form.
The interim results were pretty much according to expectations. Besides those hotspots in Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire, there is some work that's being done there, so hopefully that'll come right before the end of the year. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And here in Kenya, the 6th season of the Africa Tech Challenge is underway. This year's challenge has generated a lot of interest, with 7 teams from across Africa taking part. Now, winners receive cash prizes and scholarships to top universities in China. The challenge, part of a training program by AVIC International, helps equip young people with manufacturing skills. Here's CGTN's Robert Nagila with more.
At a workshop at the Technical University of Kenya, Divine Bedzra from Ghana and his team are training on a computer numerical machine.
Work with codings, and I think for 2 weeks, if you are able to input a program and you are able to machine, then I think the program has been so successful.
His team is part of 17 others, including participants from Kenya, Ghana, Gabon, Ethiopia, Ivory Coast, Zambia and Uganda, taking part in the 6th edition of the Africa Tech Challenge. ATC is a youth empowerment project established in 2014, which equips participants with technical skills through a training program. At the end of the program, a competition is held and the winners awarded a fully sponsored master's degree scholarship to prestigious universities in China and cash prizes. Lei Biao, who is in charge of the training, says despite a few challenges, the students have impressed.
There have been some challenges with the language barrier, but the trainees have come in during their free time and are doing very well.
Those taking part say they're impressed with the skills and knowledge acquired so far.
Okay, the progress is good. We've learned very many manufacturing skills we did not know before.
The one thing I hope to gain is the skills so that I can go back home and share the knowledge.
The program by AVIC, a Chinese company that's been in Kenya for the last 2 decades, is a partnership with the Ministry of Education on vocational training. It entails commissioning, installing and equipping of public technical training institutions with mechanical, electrical and electronic equipment. At the end, all participants will receive certificates to allow them access internships and job opportunities. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, we look at how business confidence in South Africa has dropped as a result of how the government is handling indebted state firms. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's coming up. As Muslim pilgrims embark on their annual Hajj pilgrimage, we see the significance of Kiswa, the cloth that drapes the Kaaba in the Grand Mosque of Mecca.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start with health matters, where rural communities in Africa are often on the receiving end of poor healthcare delivery. In Nigeria, most primary healthcare centers, which are designed to provide life-saving basic healthcare at the grassroots level, are faced with severe shortage of funds, lack of drugs and manpower. Health experts say the situation is quite worrying and that authorities need to move fast to address it. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
It's a typical clinic day, and this primary health center in Kuruming community in Kaduna, northwest Nigeria, is open for operation. Mothers have brought their children here for vaccination and other treatments. Attending to them is this health extension worker. She's the only one attached to the rundown health center in a community of about 1 million people, and she only comes here about 3 times in a week. These other people working for her are youth volunteers from the community.
In the clinic,
there's no equipment to work with in the clinic. We don't have enough staff, no beddings, no drugs, no delivery items. There's no equipment for even minor surgery. There is no attendant. I'm the only one here. I'm both the staff and the attendant.
From the outside, it's difficult to imagine this is a health center. It looks more like a long abandoned building with part of the roof blown off. Inside, it looks empty and disused.
We have been complaining to the federal government, state government, even the local government, but up to now there is no response. People are dying. We, the members of this community, contribute buying the medicine, the medical equipment for our people, for our residents of this locality, but we have been left behind.
The state of this primary health center is a reflection of most of the grassroots health centers across the country. In May this year, the Nigerian government disbursed $16 million to help revamp primary health centers across the country under its Basic Healthcare Provision Fund. Some civil society organizations now say they would track the money to ensure it gets to health centers like this one.
The vulnerable group need to feel the impact of this money. The women, the pregnant women, the under 5 children, the people living with sickle cell, people living with malaria, with HIV/AIDS, with tuberculosis. These are the vulnerable group at the community. They need to feel the impact of this fund across the entire country.
Nigeria has one of the world's highest maternal mortality rates. Nearly 20% of maternal deaths happen here. The rate of under 5 mortality is also among the highest in the world. And poor health facilities like this one in rural communities are the reasons for the high mortality rates. Health authorities are seriously hoping the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund would change the dynamics of primary health centers in the country. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Muslims all over the world face the iconic cube of Makkah during prayer and circle it during the Hajj. What makes that cube outstanding is the black cloth that covers it, known as Kiswa. Every year before the Hajj, the gigantic cloth gets replaced with a new one. Our correspondent Adil Mahroui shows us how it is handmade in the following report.
Kaaba is the core attraction of Mecca. It's the first stone structure built in this ancient city, and since its construction, a kiswa or a cover have always decorated it. That cover gets replaced annually right before the pilgrimage begins. It's a custom that has been preserved since the Kaaba was built some 2,000 years ago.
Not anyone gets to be a kiswa maker. To apply to join the team, you must have previous professional experience as a tailor and hand weaving. You must be tested, and after acceptance, you begin to learn the process.
Until recent decades, the kiswa was a gift from Egypt. Saudi Arabia now makes its own, but has preserved most of the centuries-old manufacturing methods. The kiswa is made of silk. Weaving it into cloth is the only automated step in the manufacturing process. The rest is all handmade. It gets dyed black, then traces of Quranic verses are sewed on it. The calligraphy gets stuffed with cotton. Finally, it carefully gets covered with wires made of silver and coated with gold. It takes about 6 months training and then 3 of practical work for a person to get hired as a sewer of the Kaaba's cover. And it's such an honor to have just a couple of strokes in this marvelous landscape that Hajj and visitors to the Holy Mosque will be seeing for a whole year. 122 people work on this colossal handmade piece. It takes them from 9 to 10 months to complete the Kiswa.
I've joined the team once during the Kiswa replacement, and I felt proud and happy to see my work on that holy structure. It's a great honor to be part of that team. When people know what I do for a living, they get astonished and they keep sending me their regards.
The Kaaba's Kiswa is more than 570 square meters in area. This month, as Mecca welcomes pilgrims, it celebrates a new cover to the center of the Muslim world. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Mecca, Saudi Arabia.
Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's coming up. Nigeria hopes to win the hosting rights for the 2020 FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.